Welcome, glad everybody's here. Thanks for attending. We've got some interesting things to share with you today. Help that 2022 process. For those of you who don't know me, I've met before. Chris Pence, going. I've been here 16 since we back. Patrick. Probably did so. We've got our staff today. They're going to do got some updates for you on certain things. We did aim to our internet credits for your certification here. And so make sure that back table you check in and we'll have a certificate for everybody to your I don't think I have much more, so I'm going to pass it off. Here's the first shot up. One thing I want to make clear is ask any questions on there. I want to make sure that it's not a one-way street. Make sure you ask questions.
All right. I'm Mitch again. I'm the environmental services specialist. I've been here about a year, a little over a year now, so I've met a lot of folks. So I'm going to be talking about today is documents for compliance inspections, septic designs, things like that. So our preferred method for submitting documents is our online portal that is now and with that, all of these things should be live and will be distributed when we send this PowerPoint around to everybody that has given us an email address here. So then all designs currently need to be submitted on forms. As of right now, minus advanced designs, those are just a monster that they have their own design later. And then at any point, if you have questions on submittals or anything like that, feel free to reach out. We got 4 ESS and 1 senior ESS that we're always willing to answer questions on. So just a quick run through kind of what is required, what's expected, just a little bit of a reminder here. The top as complete as possible. Seeing kind of a bit of a lull in all of the information up there, and if we don't have all of that information available, it can make things really difficult and potentially causing issues when we are reviewing these designs and things like that. And then bottom section, system details, fill that out, get all the information that's needed. It's pretty, if you're designing the system, you know what's going into it, but relay it in a way that we can have a complete understanding of what's going on with the design. Complete site plans are something we're going to really be focusing on here in 2023. That goes for land use and for septic designs, things like that. So we've got a list up here, kind of lists all the things that are considered a complete site plan. And I'm not going to go through and talk through every single one of those, but on this slide anyway, we'll kind of touch base on those here. So first example here is a spooky site plan. This is a site plan that was not submitted as part of a design form, but it was on another formal document that has been indexed, and it's not great. We got a little bit of a ghost feature that looks to be the house, and not a lot of other information on there. So as is outlined on the site plan, slide there, site plan, not even close. What are we missing on this site plan? Kind of pretty much everything. We got the OHW setbacks, doesn't exist. Reference to that. The setback to the dwelling, to the drain field, not on there. Soil boring locations haven't been included, and the rest of the items on there. And one note, this was from an older system, something that we kind of just stumbled across. The Halloween ghost house was kind of amusing. And on this slide, we have a much more detailed and better example of a site plan. So, much more detailed. Thing that we see right away is that north arrow is included. We have the well locations that are put up on there. I apologize, this is going to get a little redundant here, so we'll kind of breeze through it. Soil boring locations, proponent locations. OHW is addressed with the bluff being noted on there. It's not formally laid out, but most situations when you're running into a bluff and you're meeting the setback there, you're not going to be running into that OHW setback being an issue. Bedroom, the location of the house, the setbacks there. One thing that we do want to make sure to note is that the system components on the site plan, that they match what has been laid out in the design details on that design page, the worksheet there. So one thing just to kind of point that out is we have a little bit of an example design here where they have the trenches, 4 42-foot trenches laid out in the design details, and they're also the same there, so that helps a lot. Same thing for the septic tank information. All right, obtaining a permit. So when do you need a permit? Essentially after the design has been submitted and approved, for the install of the system and before the upgrade or change is made to the system. So if you're upgrading, changing it in any way that is going to change the system and the way it functions, you're going to need a permit to complete that work. But a permit is not required for all maintenance, all work like that. So a couple examples of when a permit is not needed is replacement of the pump, baffle replacement, effluent screen filters, and advanced systems. So just briefly, we have been having some conversation on switching over from our county design forms to the U of M forms. And what we're looking for is feedback from septic professionals that work.
Don't do it.
No.
Don't do it.
Is that our answer?
That very well may be our answer. What we do want to see is just some formalized feedback on this. So if you guys want to take those green forms that are kind of laid out in front of you, the survey for how the presentation was, you can fill the rest of it out after the meeting. But for this portion of it, I'll give you just a second here, fill out, give us some feedback on your thoughts on switching over to the U of M forms.
If we're not going to switch to U of M forms, let us know what we need to add to our forms. We're kind of lacking. Like I've run into issues where we don't have the correct turf sizings on there, or we're missing some of those sizings. Give us some feedback on what you think we need to add.
Preparation?
Yeah, preparations. Like I think our form doesn't account for 3/16 for perfs on there. It only does like a 1/2 and a 1/4 or something like that. Let us know some feedback and stuff like that, because we need to know how to update it to be a better form for you guys.
Maybe update the soils part of it, where you record your soils. That's the only thing I like about the U forms is.
Sure. So kind of lay out something similar to you maybe.
So that's about it I like from them.
For soils.
The thing is, you know, you can go to septic resource, like all your calculations are already done for you. I think you guys should be able to use that. Not only that, these forms don't have time dosing. They don't have your flow calculations for, especially on pressurized systems. Those have to be accurate. Not only the sizing, say the 3/16 for larger systems, you're gonna wanna use a 3/16 hole instead of a 1/4 inch because it screws up the larger system. Not only that, your form actually is not compliant with the MPCA because you don't have 3 borings for a system. And not only that, you're supposed to have your texture, consistency, all that stuff on there.
For sure. The only thing I'd say to it too is we have that yellow book for reference as well, so not the blue 7080. So we have some differing standards there for local standards.
That's a good question. So I was actually using the bathroom, so I think I came in halfway through. But, so is the question going to the U of M forms, right? And so,
Yeah.
so we have a unique ordinance in that we're still going by the old gold book, which we use in the project instead of linear loading, right? And so we have an updated ordinance for, it's been a while. For us to go to those U of M forms, which I would support, we have to have a ordinance that would be able to use those forms. They don't think they have a soil sizing factor on those forms for the university.
I know, I'm not familiar totally with the U of M forms. We use Septic Resources for
Right.
making our forms, and that
So-
has everything you need on it.
Yeah.
And actually, they're easy to read, so somebody has to follow up, say, put a pump in, everything's written on there, know what time, what your doses are supposed to be,
Yep,
especially
no,
the
I'm,
time dose, what the time.
I think it makes perfect sense. I think, you know, so right now, when we size, you know, drain field sizing is based on that soil sizing factor, we're going three, you know. That's not on the forms, I don't believe they use that linear loading rate, which is part of the new,
Right.
the blue code.
The loading rate,
So is there so the question I have for you guys, and I ask later, but I'll ask you now, is there appetite to change and go back and get so that we're using the most current blue book? So like when you guys go to septic school and they're talking about linear loading rates and stuff, it'll apply more to your day-to-day work and we would stop with this, with the old way of doing it and get, you know, with the more current way of doing business, we just have to update the ordinance to do that.
Well, actually, Septic Resource has a yellow book and a
Yeah.
purple book.
Right.
So you do have.
Yeah, right.
For.
But the question is, are we, I think we're getting to the point, you know, with this now where I think we can make that transition over if there's that interest. Now Tom's got a point to make too, so.
Just years ago, when we opted to stay with the alternative local standards.
Yep.
We did that largely because of one of the prime driving factors in this was, the simplicity of the ALS as opposed to the newer books.
Yep.
And also the 25% rule on 8.3s as opposed to the 15% rule on all sands.
Yeah, so that'd be the big difference, right? We'd have, we wouldn't be able to do the divider trenches with even vertical trenches and stuff. We'd have that 50% rule, so, you know.
The 3-bedroom system right now that takes 4 25-foot trenches, it takes 7 15-footers. It just seems like it just seems like an awful lot of extra digging and a lot of fooling around.
It does. It
Yep.
does. So the question, you know, I think that, you know, the question is, are we happy with what we got? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm okay with that. You know, we can have a discussion about forms. I'm not saying that we, you know, I think we can definitely discuss if we want to use our forms or if we want to use the other forms. I think we can have that.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. If you can just, instead of using that or just the accept another form that's compliant.
Yeah.
Like I say, you can go yellow book or
Yeah.
purple book.
Yeah.
And, you know, so if you're worried about trench sizing, you know, well, what about mounds and
Yeah.
pressure vents?
Yep.
You know, you're gonna get a.
So we just need to make sure that when we're using that form, we're just using the yellow book,
Yeah.
not the purple form. I don't, you know, from my perspective, I think, you know, we maybe need to sit down as a team and chat about it. We can get back together on it, but, for forms, I don't really have a problem using that other.
Yeah, and not only that, then like I said, you know, either add on to yours where you can get the dosings.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, no,
and also all the smaller perks.
Okay. Well, you answered one question, which I kind of figured the answer, but I thought I'd answer a question about our current ordinance, the way it's size, or if we're using that for sand and that texture, so. We'll get back to you guys on the
Accept
forms.
the U of M form.
Are there many designs submitted that aren't on Crow Wing County forms,
Really depends on, you know,
the designer?
yeah, you know, but then, yeah, it's just.
I would say the majority are.
A lot of
Probably like
newer
98%.
people coming into it are throwing them on those design forms and they just get a little lengthy, I would say, but I don't see any, you know. And we review your designs, so we're all in favor of what you guys like because we want to speak the same language.
Yeah.
Well, and then it's less for, I mean, you're looking at the same thing across the
'Cause
board.
We want to get them off and approved to you now as soon as possible, which you hopefully saw some increase in that turnaround now that more of us are all licensed up, so.
Does that make sense? We can get back to you guys and we'll, you know.
We already voted, Chris.
It was already very comfortable with the other form, so I think.
It sounds like scrap U of M forms, possibly take septic resource and update our form.
Yep.
So then we can have two forms of
No,
design.
I think those are the two options in my mind. That makes perfect sense. If you guys are okay with that, I think we're okay with that. So, Tom?
Probably would be wise to continue to accept the U of M forms. If somebody doesn't know any better.
Yep.
Okay. Don't send them back and say you need to redo this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Do not do that. Just let them know that next time, we have these special forms and send them to them or send them the link to your website and let it go at that.
That's a good point, Tom. I like that. Yeah. Does that work for the forums? Does that make everybody a little bit, make this a little easier? Okay. So you do that. Hey, Chris?
I think that unless it's changed, but doesn't the ordinance say you're only allowed to submit on Crow Wing County's forms? So maybe just something to tweak in your ordinance?
I get Sharpie.
I think at one time, Chris, it did say U of M forms or Crow Wing County forms.
Or just delete the clause
I
and.
won't swear
That's
to
a good
that.
point, Aaron. We'll have to take a look at that to make sure, but for right now, you know, we'll still accept the forms. So just the forms, we'll make it work. Fair enough? Okay. I won't step out again and tell you why it's so curveball.
You know, you better stop.
I know, what did I do?
Just go back to your hole.
Time that out perfectly. Yeah. Let us know when you want to
Pick it up once in a while, see where bullets are flying.
So that's all I have for the complete documentation and obtaining my permits portion. Is there any questions on that? I mean, you guys are all doing it thoroughly and there's no issues, so.
I'll hop in, just that permitting software thing again. Again, if you have apprehensions or concerns about how your stuff is getting submitted, feel free to reach out. There was part of the letter that got sent out, Nicolette may have touched on this,
I've
for
not
this
yet.
registration regarding online submission only. We're obviously still going to take in forms. We have a 24-hour Dropbox out front. You're going to drop paper in there, it's at your own risk. And then the countertop as well. The land services email, one of the caveats with that is it's a general email that just goes, anything goes there. So if you have concerns about it getting to us in that email format, I just strongly encourage you to go right into the software and load it in, because that comes directly to our work areas. So you don't have a second or third person that you're waiting on for it to get to us to review. We don't have that ability when you submit it to land services. And then I know you would say, well, can I just send it to your email in a pinch? I'm totally okay with that, but you know, having an unreliable schedule out in the field and things like you guys know, if you have urgent needs, getting it online is accessible for all of us. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Question, is that stuff that all our history on the RT Vision from our previous accounts, is that gone?
No.
There's a way to access that?
So anything that you had in RT Vision prior to September 27th, it would still be in your accounts. I'm not sure what an end user side looks like for what you guys could see and anything like that. If you have questions about past parcels or documents that you want pulled out of there that you're not finding indexed, reach out to one of us.
Should have been indexed, right? So they
Yeah,
should-
and if indexes, I mean, those are things that we can fix it as soon as we know about it. When those things are in error, even just designs on anything that you guys see, reach out. We all have the capacity to make that change and make it work. And then RT Vision, a little different, but if you need past stuff, we can get you
You
anything.
still get it,
Okay.
Their dashboards should still be their
I think so,
dashboards for
yeah.
what they've applied for.
Yep, because you're still, RT Vision's still active for wetlands and for site consultation, so even just a site visit is still in there. The only thing that got pulled out was land use, shoreland alteration, and then septic document submission. So for septic documentation, that's gonna be CRM and that format where you'll see statuses. For designs, you'll be loading in your unapproved designs. One thing I'll tell you about the way that the software works is we're going to delete those originals and replace it with our stamp on it. For any reason, if you're worried about that, make sure you just save a copy of yours, because what you load into that application, we're going to delete out and replace it with the approved one with the stamp. Okay, cool. That's all I got.
And then one thing I did want to touch on just real fast about complete documentation. Really make sure that we're getting the right property ID number on those septic designs, because if it's not, that causes a whole host of issues down the road. So
I'll weigh in on that too, sorry. I know when it gets hard, and I know that some of these parcels, for those that are working on these old plats where the lines are just completely out of the place, it's hard for me too, but I have some really smart people that help me with understanding some of those things. And so for some of these parcels, you know, specifically on some of these older ones, Bay Lake in my area, you're not going to know where property lines are based on GIS because it's completely mismapped. So I've had a couple people where that can be a challenge, and I'm totally able to help figure out what we can for that. I don't want that to be a restriction for you guys doing a design for someone, so that's another just point I have to make.
We also have to include all property ID numbers too, that's associated. If it
Yeah.
crosses over, we have to include both.
And there's times where those addresses don't line up, so if it looks weird when you pull it up on GIS and you know you're out in the field and it wasn't the pine, the trees that you're seeing there and you're over on a different spot, just let me know, because I had a couple that came through that was just wonky deeds, and it just kind of manipulated in that way, and that's something that I think that if we all just work together, we can try to get help for each other, because that can happen, so.
So on the parcel, if there's two parcels, and it's become, well, there's still two parcels, but you're gonna be working on, put both of those on the design.
I would say the one that you're working on, if you're not working on the other one.
But if it's both, put them both down.
Then yes.
And no harm in overdoing it, underdoing it.
So there's 6 of them, just mainly like the 1 or 2 you're working on,
Yeah,
acceptable.
yeah, if you're not working on
The caveat to that would be if your applicant then comes in separate from you and they're talking a parcel 2 doors down from where your design is indexed. So think about, that format. If you go to like a house where the parcel ID and the address associate, I could see that
Get the
being
mailing parcels.
something that, and you can see those address points on GIS, well, they'll pull it up. So if you can get it under the parcel that's associated, that address for the customer service team will pull them to the parcel before legals or anything like that. So that is just helpful. I know it can be tricky when those splits happen and all that, because I deal with all the back end fixing of it. So reach out for help if you have questions about that.
Okay. System design of existing components. Oh, freeze, sorry. For those who were not here earlier, I'm Nicolette, Center, Environmental Services Specialist. And, yes, so system design of existing components. Each of you let us know in a completely different way, and it's all acceptable, but we're going to kind of streamline this. So some of you let us know by writing on there, whether it's by the tank. So if a tank failed, you're out at a property, you're doing a compliance inspection. Tank failed and we're doing a design for that system. You have to have passing components included with your design. So for instance, if we are just doing a tank replacement or you're utilizing the tank that is there, you let us know in one form or another, whether it's by tank sizing and what's going to be existing and new, or in additional notes on the bottom of the page. Or you just put in what the septic tank capacity is, the pump tank capacity, and then on the site plan, you let us know which components are existing and which are going to be new. So all of it is acceptable, of course, as long as you have the sewage tank integrity form if it's for a new tank, or you're using an existing tank, sorry, and you have this form with, great. If we don't have this, we are going to return the design to you. We have to have, if you're going to use an existing component, we have to have that component be compliant and that form associated.
So if we're just replacing the tank, do you want all the information on the drain field on the design?
As long as so usually you will do the compliance inspection in the design. You send us both. As long as we have both on file,
Okay.
or you send us the compliance inspection and then 2 months later in the design, as long as we have them on file, we have to have it on file. So if you're at a site and you want to reuse a tank, but everything else is going, you have to have it pumped and have to have this included with the design. That's just a common thing that we haven't been seeing in returning designs back.
Just label it too as the existing and then put it, existing incorporated in and anything that gives us that understanding.
Exactly. So I made these slight updates to our design forms. Very, very slight.
They're the U of M forms.
Sorry, guys. No. So what I did is eliminate confusion because we're getting really used to I'm going to say like OG designers, right? We're used to them. There's some new guys coming in that are a little confusing with how they're letting us know which components are existing and which are going to be new on a design. So we just added in simple check marks next to septic tank and pump tank. Is it existing? Great. right? Is it new, cool? Just check one or the other and let us know what that capacity is. So if you're gonna use both, maybe an additional note, write new and existing, existing 1200 and then new 2250, whatever you're gonna do, just label it.
So I'm kind of new to this. So I need an explanation.
Absolutely.
Instead, last year, we turned in a certificate of compliance for a tank, to reuse a tank. That was okay. But now we have to have this integrity form
No,
also?
no, it hasn't changed, no.
Okay.
If you chose to do the tank integrity form from the pumper instead of doing the inspection yourself, then you would need to include that.
Okay. Okay.
If someone did a compliance inspection on it and reviewed it themselves, and we would have that part on file on the compliance inspection.
Okay.
We've just been seeing designs come in using existing components. Example, a tank. It's almost always a tank. People are wanting to reuse tanks, not sending us in a compliance inspection, right? Because everything else has failed, but they are not sending in that associated integrity form. Or just saying, I want.
Or a compliance inspection.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't catch the or.
Yeah. Probably didn't see it.
Mhm.
There we go.
I'm sure I wasn't the only one that didn't hear that either, so, thank you.
Yes. So yeah, we just added that. It's, all of our forms should be updated by the end of today if they're not already. This is just a brand new change today, so. Need operating permits. When is an operating permit required? Of course, when we have high strength waste, for Minnesota rule, it's a Crow Wing County rule that if there's 3 or more connections, an operating permit is also required. So if you guys are designing campground, housing development, and you just have to make sure that you're also including an operating permit with your design. It's something that you're probably not used to, but we will return the design to you until there's an operating permit included with it. Type 4 and 5 SSTS, and any system that exceeds daily flow 2,500 MSTS. So new operating permits for Crow Wing County, we have kind of revamped our system for how we're doing operating permits, and we're just streamlining them. So they're all due at the exact same time. All renewals are going on at the same time, and nobody's getting lost. So for new operating permits, for new systems, they must be completed by the designer and submitted with the design for review. Operating permits must be on the county forms. Those can be found online as well. And a new operating permit system is going to be valid for 5 years, just like a certificate of install would be. For renewals, all operating permits are going to expire on December 15th of their expiring year. So just streamlining those, all of them. So whether it's valid for 5 years or 3, it's going to expire on December 15th of that year. Renewal operating permits will be mailed at the beginning of October. So that way the landowner has some time to maybe find a new maintainer, if they don't have one, maybe somebody retired, and then get that information back to us. And then once an operating permit is renewed, the copy is sent to the landowner and the contractor, the maintainer on the operating permits, and you guys have an idea of who's calling you their maintainer. Operating permit renewals are valid for 3 years, and all reporting must be submitted to the county by December 15th of that year. So any reporting that's been done in the summertime, we just need to submit it by December 15th. And then for Article 37.25, it is actually a violation of the ordinance for these landowners to not submit reporting. And so I know it's on them to hire public officers as their maintainers. We just want to make sure that we're out there, we're checking their systems, and we're getting paperwork back to us in time.
Sure, yeah. You're
Just a point of clarification on that. So service providers, when they are managing a system, an operating permit, they're required by their license to turn that into the county. So you don't have to do it as a landowner, it's the service provider has to. And another thing, I would just point out, one of the topics that she was just talking about, there is a printout that you all have about using existing components. So if you, I can't remember what she said, it's all spelled out really nicely for you in that printout, so.
Any online questions or anything, Nicole? No.
They're gonna show up at 2:00 again.
So, you don't, I don't know, you don't really this right now. You can use the keys.
It's not all of them.
There's nothing to like advance the slides while I'm moving around. No, I mean to advance the slides.
You can, if you wanna give me the go, I'll do it for you.
I'll do it.
Okay.
IT is, there's like wireless.
We've just been using the arrows up and down.
So I threw my.
Yes.
Walk around.
Go to the next one.
That's because you can't write. Yep.
Everything. Yeah, it should be.
It's not gonna have somebody's email popping up or anything, is it?
No.
You've been warned in case that happens, you don't have it.
If they hear and you can move the mouse and it should be able, maybe not.
It should be, how was your operating?
I'm fine with it, as long as I don't stop popping that you don't want people seeing.
All my teams.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll risk it.
Team messages or anything like that.
I already asked most people I know to hold off on it for today, but you never know, so.
Like mine.
Yeah, you might get something out there. Yeah, I'm just kidding, it's notifications or something.
All right. Well. So Zach, everybody's excited for me to be back, right? That's why you all came here today. You're so thrilled to see me. Yes, I hear a yes.
Can't hear you, Aaron.
You can't hear me.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll come sit by Bob and talk the whole hour.
There you go.
Bob's getting uncomfortable, I better not do that. Well, I expected a standing ovation, but I didn't get it, so maybe that's coming at the end, I suppose, I don't know. But my name is Aaron Patrick. I think most of you know who I am. I used to work in these fine buildings for about 12 and a half years, for those of you that don't know that. I had to spend time with people like Tom Esperson and Chris Pence, and that was unfortunate, so I had to leave.
Are you better off for it, Aaron?
No, it was actually a good experience. I enjoyed my time with both of them. I even got to work with Nicolette, who was not there. I just pointed to her, and she's not there. I got to work with her for a little bit, but not too much. And then, of course, I went on to the MPCA. In case you're wondering, that's where I've been for the last 4+ years. I work in compliance and enforcement, which, yep, that's a word that people like to hear is enforcement. That doesn't mean that's all I do. Matter of fact, that's actually my least favorite part of my job. So I'd much rather talk about compliance and doing things right. And when people have some questions, they can just call and ask, and then we'll give them the right answer, and they can just do the right thing, and then nobody has to deal with this lovely crap of enforcement. Hopefully you all know that about me by now. If you don't remember that, yes, I will answer the phone. I know that's weird for a state employee to say that, but I will answer the phone. And if I don't answer the phone, just leave a message, and I promise you I will call you back. If I don't call you back right away, that means I didn't get your message. So try it again. Okay? Don't feel like you're pestering me because I want to get your questions answered. So I have the middle part of the state there. That's where I'm responsible for working with compliance and enforcement. But I also do things like this where I go up, present at classes, U of M classes. You've seen me. Some of you have already. Various classes, continuing ed classes, those types of things. Also doing a lot of phone calls for people, whether it's landowners, professionals like yourselves, or counties, cities, townships in my region, mostly. And just a small plug, I don't think anybody in here hasn't done this yet, but if you haven't turned in your tank fee form, please, for the love of God, just turn it in. Okay? I know you like hearing from me in the springtime, but yes, I like talking to you, but I would just rather you just turn it in.
When are the fees due this year?
30 days after your invoice. So if you don't have an invoice, you're not overdue yet. If you turned it in within, let's see, before February 15th, I believe it was, then you should have gotten an invoice already.
But then you were late. What happened to 30?
I'm saying like everybody that turned their stuff in before February 15th,
Gotcha.
they sent out a blast of invoices all at once. So if you turned it in before that date and you didn't get an invoice, call me, I guess. Okay? So, that being said, I was asked to come here and talk about some stuff, primarily compliance inspections, kind of going along with the theme of completeness and things like that. So we'll just look here at the first item. Is some of this might seem kind of, I don't know, boring or whatever you want to say, but we'll just kind of go through compliance inspections. And you see the first thing is circled up there, says 15 days. I think we all know what that means. It means we have to turn the stupid thing in within 15 days of the compliance inspection, right? That 15 days means when? When does the 15 days start? It means when your inspection is done, you have 15 days to fill it out and turn it in. And not just to the county, but also to the landowner. Okay? So you have 15 days to do that. And 15 days doesn't mean when I got paid, and I know that's, I mean, you can throw things at me, and I understand that's a frustrating answer, and I get that, and I kind of feel for you on that one. But I'm the state, and I have to tell you the true answer, so that you just have all the information you need to make educated decisions, and how you choose to do things with that information is up to you. But I can just give you the answer. I know that that's been played out in court before, and apparently the answer was payment does not mean that's when the 15 days starts. So, what's that?
You need to change.
So I'm a staff level employee, and there's like, I don't know how many levels above me that get to rulemaking, and that's not me. I appreciate your thought, though. I kind of understand your thought. That's as far as I'll admit loudly. But that doesn't mean you can't get creative with your compliance inspection submittals. So if you have to go to a property and you have, we'll just pick a good number. There's 5 things, let's say, you have to do on a compliance inspection. If you haven't done all 5 of them yet, your 15 days hasn't started yet. Okay? So if you want to get creative and, you know, hold the carrot away and say, well, we got to get paid and then I'll do that last thing for you, that's your choice. Because I can't say that you didn't turn it in yet because you weren't done with it yet.
It's not finished until you sign it, right?
No, it is finished. The form being submitted is submitted when you're done with the inspection. Your inspection when you're out there is not like one of your tasks is I got to find a pen, right? You're trying to figure out is the tank good, is the drain field good, what's the soil look like, all that stuff. When you've done all those tasks that you need to do, that's when you have 15 days to fill the form out and turn it in. Good, bad, or ugly, that's the answer that we are all stuck with. It is what it is. I will say, I don't look for these types of things, but I will also say they do end up in my plate or on my desk, whatever you want to say. That does happen from time to time. Not very often, but once in a while it does happen. And I would say one of the most common things that comes out of that is, oh, the realtor was gonna turn it in for me. Please stop asking realtors to turn them in for you. Why? Because sometimes they're not going to. Why don't they? I don't know. You'd have to ask them. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they thought you meant turn it in to the landowner. I don't know. What's that? They don't want to pay for them. They don't want to pay for them. That could be part of the issue as well. Yep. But selfishly, I'll say, please turn it in yourselves so that I don't have to deal with potential enforcement, right? We go back to that whole thing. I really don't, please don't put me in that position. If you can at all avoid it, I would love it if we would avoid that. So, I think I've harped on that enough to just recognize that that is something that does get turned in once in a while. And I guess one more thing about that, we're not talking on day 16. People aren't turning things over to the state and saying, oh my God, somebody was 1 day late. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, hey, we got this inspection today and it was, apparently it was done 7 months ago. That's the kind of stuff that usually gets brought up. So, whoops. I'll go on to that too. All right, so I'll come over here because I was over there too much already. Going through this, a lot of this is self-explanatory, I hope. But this top part, we'll talk about that. No, we're not going to talk about every line there. But what I'll just say is lines are not meant to be blank. Okay, so don't skip parts of it. And for those of you thinking, why would I skip parts of that? I don't know, people do. So like the property address, that wasn't a joke. People wanted the property address when they put this form together. So make sure you're putting everything on the form that it's asking for. The next piece here, we look at system status date, self-explanatory, unless there's like a 2 inspection process that you went through. Maybe you were out there twice. If you had to go out there twice, what day do you put down? The most recent day that you were there. Okay, so if you're having that question, just recognize it's the most recent time that you were there. That's the day you would put for your inspection date. Certainly, you could document that you were there on multiple days, but the status of the system is going to be based on the last time that you were there. Then, of course, we have to say if it was compliant or not. Why am I talking about that? That doesn't seem like it's complicated. You're right, it's not complicated. But if you say it's non-compliant, the one thing I'll point out about that is down below that, then you are now in a place where you have to check at least one of these boxes. You have to say, why was it non-compliant? And you might be thinking, Aaron, why are you talking about that? Because some people do that, apparently. We see inspection forms that are blank toward that area, and I don't know why. It's probably just absent-mindedness. But here's just a plug and maybe a plea for you. Please make sure you're filling that out as you're going through those. This is the part where I push the clicker and go on to the next slide. And there we go. All right. So the bottom of the page, 2 things I'll point out about this. One, especially for those of you that are newer to the industry, just want to recognize the fact that there's 2 different numbers here, certification and license. Those are 2 different numbers. And I understand that's kind of confusing, and I don't blame you. But certification, of course, is your actual, I've been trained, I know what I'm doing in this task. License is, I have a business license, right? And if you're kind of trying to figure out which one's which, number 1, you can always look on the MPCA website and look yourself up. Or number 2, a dead giveaway is certification number starts with a C and license number starts with an L, okay? So if you're ever confused on that, just take a peek at that. The other thing I'll say about the bottom of this page is we have a little date right here, 4/28 of 2021. That's the most current version of the form. So maybe tonight, whatever, you go home, take a look, make sure you have the most current version. If you don't, go to the MPCA website and get the up-to-date form. If you can't find it on there, you need help getting it, I'm sure the county would help you out. I would also promise you that I would help you out. But for those of you that are wondering, am I going to say that same thing I say in other classes? Yes, I will. I don't know if you're having trouble unless you tell me you're having trouble. So if you can't find something I don't know, you're not able to find it unless you tell me you can't find it. So shoot me an email, call me, whatever. I'll get it back to you as soon as I can. Or, like I say, I'm sure the county would help you out as well. The next page on the compliance inspection is pretty simple. I don't think we'll spend a lot of time here. There's 3 yes/no questions. Pretty simple, standard routine. I think we all know how to answer those. One thing I will point out though is right down below here, it says describe verification methods and results. That's not really a suggestion either. That's where you're putting in what did you do. You're claiming credit for the work that you did. I know you did work because you turned in an inspection form, but if you're not writing anything in there, it's not looking too good for you when people start questioning what you did. And I'll take this moment to just pause on that. This is also probably weird to hear, but I want to back you up. I want to help you out. I want to have your back. So when somebody calls, because it does happen, or maybe the county even wants to have your back and wants to help you out. When somebody calls and they have loose allegations about you that he didn't even do anything. And then I look at this inspection form and say, well, let's see. It says here they did nothing, apparently. So I would highly encourage you, and actually it's required, to indicate what your verification methods and results were. And just as an example, one of the questions is, system causes sewage backup into the dwelling or establishment. And you say yes. Well, how do you know? Well, I talked to the homeowner. All right, so write that in there. We're not asking for a 5-page essay, just a couple of lines there, a couple words, whatever it was that you needed to get your point across. The tank section of the form. Let's spend more time on this one. All right. First of all, on the left-hand side, we have a couple of yes/no questions I think we're all very familiar with. You know, is it a cesspool? Is it leaking below operating depth? Yep, okay. Before you move over there to the right-hand side, I just want to point out there's one more thing right here. It says if there's a leak, you're supposed to explain which one, which tank has the leak. And you might say, well, Aaron, there's only one tank. Why do I have to write that there? And I would agree with you. I think we can all understand which tank it is if there's only one tank. But if there's more than one tank, please write something in there. And I would even say take it a step farther and say it's the second tank on the north wall, so people know where you were looking. Where was that leak? Right? All right, so on the right-hand side here now we have some check boxes. And there was a rule change a couple of years ago, you've all heard it by now, where you have to have your tank emptied out for the evaluation in order to be able to say that it's compliant, right? And so when you're doing that, you have 2 options. You have the top option there, which is saying that I as the inspector, I looked at that tank when it was empty. Probably the most common option that we see get used. So somebody checks that, says, I looked at it. What does that mean now? It means that these 3 right here are now not supposed to be blank anymore. Or in other words, they're required. So the name of the maintainer, their business, and the date, those things have to be filled out. The good news is they're not things that you don't know. It's not like we're talking, you know, complex physics or something. You're just writing the name of the business and the date that they were out there, right? So those things aren't optional. Why am I harping on that a little bit? Because we've seen that. We have seen that. I've had counties ask me, what do I do with this? Well, it's not complete. Ask the inspector to finish it. And so then people get frustrated with the county, and I would just say, please don't get frustrated with the county. Believe it or not, they're actually doing you a favor. I know that doesn't sound like it, but when somebody calls and wants to look at that 5 years from now, 5 months from now, whatever, and people are questioning your work, and there's large blank spots where there's supposed to be material typed in there, it just doesn't look good for you. So they're kind of doing you a favor, in my opinion, by pointing those things out. Or you could just say they're doing their job and saying, hey, we don't have a complete page number 2 here, could you please finish it? Okay? So the other option is existing tank integrity assessment attached. So if you check that box, well, just like the one above it, that means you now have this line below there you have to fill out. And again, it's not complicated info that you don't know. It's what was the date of the maintenance? That's it. And then you'll notice it says in that line, existing tank integrity assessment, and then it says in parentheses attached. If you've chosen this option, that means you have to attach. Not optional at that point. So we see people, they say, well, it's on file or the homeowner has it, or trust me, it was pumped, or whatever the theory is in somebody's head. When you choose this option, it has to be attached to the compliance inspection form. So when the county calls and says, hey, we don't have that, don't get mad at them. Once again, they're actually doing you a favor. Again, I know that seems weird, but they are helping you out, whether you believe that or not. They are actually helping you on that. Now, there's a third option here. It says tank not compliant, pumping not necessary. What does that mean? Well, that tank pumping rule that came in 2 years plus away or in the past, a lot of people sort of refer to that and say, well, now every compliance inspection requires a tank pumping. That's not exactly true. So if you already know the tank is not compliant, you don't need to pump it to prove that. For example, if you know there's no bottom, you don't need to pump it to prove that. Or the lid's caving in, you don't need to pump it to prove that. So if you're in that position where you already know the status, you're going to check not compliant, pumping not necessary, and then it says explain below. And just like up here where attach in parentheses was a requirement, same here, you're going to say the explanation of why you're not pumping it down here in your verification methods and results. Claim credit for the work that you're doing, so that when somebody calls me and says you didn't, or this person didn't do their work, or whatever the case might be, it is so much easier for me to be able to have your back and defend you than if you just have blank parts where there's supposed to be information. So please help me to help you put that stuff in. Now, diving into that a little bit deeper, one question that I've had on this general topic is, do I have to inspect through the maintenance hole? And for those of you, do we have any maintainers in the room? All right, I don't have to clarify that. We're talking about compliance inspections, not pumping. So, do I have to inspect through the maintenance hole? And the rule says, well, it says what it is on the board here. Compliant tank integrity assessment must be completed on an empty tank. Yep, we know that already. Through a maintenance hole when available. What does that mean? What does available mean? And what if it's not available? Available has no definition in rule, so that's exciting. So that means we're all kind of just floating on that one. So one thing that means is the MPCA is not typically going to get involved with that and tell you, yes, it was available, you can go look through that maintenance hole. If it was above the ground, we can probably tell you that. But if it's below the ground and you've made the decision for whatever that reason was with you and discussing with the homeowner, whatever it was, that this is not available, okay, it's not available. So then what does that mean? What do I do? Can I inspect this tank if I don't have an available maintenance hole? Yes, you still can. Just to clarify on that, you can still inspect the tank even if the manhole is not available. You remember prior to 2021 January, that rule change, you didn't have a mandate on exactly how you had to inspect the tank, but you just had to inspect it, right? All those things you used to do, and hopefully are still doing, those things still exist. You know, cameras, probing, whatever it is you did, those things still exist. So you still, so if the manhole is not available, you still have all those other tools and resources and methods available to you as you're making that compliance determination. Okay?
How do they get an empty tank if they don't pump it through the maintenance hole?
Remember I asked if there's any maintainers in the room. So
Yeah.
the maintainers are required, I'm yelling so I'll step back here. The maintainers are required to inspect through the manhole, right? We know that. If they get a signed refusal from the homeowner saying, I refuse to allow you to pump through the manhole. Usually it's because it's underneath some flower beds or something like that. They don't want them digging up their yard. They have a party that weekend, whatever. Technically, the maintainer is then relieved of that obligation. They have to get it in writing that I'm refusing to allow you to dig up my yard or to go through the manhole. So if they've now pumped through the 4-inch because the homeowner refused, they were fine. So then you as a compliance inspector, you have a different angle on the bill. Is it available? So if you determine that it's not available because it's under the flower bed or it's under the sidewalk or whatever it is that you're unwilling or unable to get to it, and you've determined it's not available, then you still continue to do your inspection through all of your other available methods.
Okay, so they pump through 4-inch pipe.
Yep.
There's still 3-4 inches of sewage in the bottom of the tank.
Mm-hmm.
Is that empty?
It's as empty as they're gonna get it,
Right, because they haven't gone through the maintenance.
because the homeowner,
So where does that?
because the homeowner understood, because the maintainer explained to them, if you make me do this through the 4-inch, I'm not gonna do the job that you thought I was gonna do. I'm not gonna do the full job that you're paying me to do. It's not going to be quality like you're supposed to get if you would let me go through the manhole. And
But
if they
is that
say
an
super, then
Is that
whatever.
an empty tank at that point?
It's as empty as the maintainer's gonna get it. Are you talking about for compliance inspection?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, that's as empty as they're gonna get it, so you have that obstacle. Now, you could, as an inspector, say, I'm not gonna inspect this tank unless you actually get it fully empty for me. And if they say, fine, I'll find somebody else, then you just move on with your life, yeah. I mean, you have certain conditions that, I'm gonna inspect the tank, and it's gotta be this way, and so, I mean, that's kind of a good question or a good angle off of your question is, if it's not available, you don't have to inspect the system. You can say, you know what, I need to see this, and if you're not gonna let me have it be available, you're gonna call the next person then, because I'm not willing to say this tank is good by peering through here and seeing, like you say, a couple inches of stuff sitting in the tank still. I'm not comfortable with that, so you need to hire somebody else. Or let's get a pumper out here that can wash this out so I can give you a legitimate view of this tank.
Or let's dig up the lid and put some risers on there so it's accessible.
Yep. That answer your question? So another angle on tank inspections. Couple of what ifs. Remember, you can't say a tank is compliant unless somebody looked at it when it was empty. Okay? So remember that as we talk through these what ifs. So what if the drain field is non-compliant and the owner wants new tanks because they don't want old tanks with new drain fields? They say, all right, you said my mound is junk. Great, I want a whole brand new system. I don't care if my existing tank is good or not. Don't want it. I think we can all understand and agree that pumping that out, only to have it inspected and then replace it 2 months later and then they have to pump it out again, is kind of a tough deal for them financially. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's kind of silly. I would say it's unfair. So you don't have to do that. So then what you're going to do, this is fun. What you're going to do then is say tank non-compliant, pumping not necessary, explain below, and you're going to explain landowner wanted new tanks. Once they found out that their drain field needed to be replaced, they didn't care, whatever. Like, explain what happened. Again, doesn't have to be a 5-page essay. Explain what happened and why you didn't pump the tanks and why you're calling them non-compliant. Because remember, rule says you can't say that it's compliant if you didn't look at it when it was empty. Then your only other option is to say that it was non-compliant. Another similar what if. What if the homeowner refuses to allow me to pump it after I started the inspection? So this is more of a less friendly interaction with your customer. Maybe they're telling you to get the hell off my property because you've never been there before, I'm sure. So If they're saying to you, you know, let's say you said that the drain field was not looking so good, I can't pass it, and then you start talking about looking at the tank and they say, time out, get out of here. Once you've started that inspection and actually made some determination on part of the system, the MPCA would tell you, you have to finish the inspection. Finish doesn't mean you stand there and argue with them and have them swinging bats at you and you know, throwing things at you. We don't want you in that position, but you have to finish it. So how do you finish it if you're told to leave? Well, you come to this particular item right here, once again, say tank is not compliant, pumping not necessary, and you're gonna explain what happened. Landowner wouldn't let me finish, so I had to fail it because I couldn't pass it. Why? Because I wasn't allowed to see it when it was empty.
And you're not gonna get paid.
It's very possible.
No, it's guaranteed.
So, what I would say about that, whether it would actually help enough or not, I don't know. What I will say about that, sometimes as a regulator, we are asking people to work through rules that are not comfortable or that we don't like to tell them about. So, for example, you have to have a permit for your travel trailer. God, I'm glad I don't have to enforce that anymore. Sorry, guys. But I hated that. I hated that. Oh, gosh, it was so weird to me. But if I asked somebody to explain that on my behalf, you know, a contractor or a builder, whatever, and they had to explain a rule that I wasn't a huge fan of, or they weren't a huge fan of, I should say, I didn't just say, take the bullet for me. I was the county guy. I mean, if it wasn't something you were really wanting to say, yeah, this is awesome about, say, call Aaron. Aaron said that you have to have a travel trailer permit. He'd be happy to explain it to you. And so those of you that remember me saying those things to you, I'm still that same guy. So if there's something that you get into a position where you say, landowner, you're telling me I can't finish this, but as a part of my license requirement, the MPCA is saying I'm going to have to turn this as a non-compliant tank. Not me, but I'm having to do this because the state says I have to. Aaron Patrick, 218-316-3909. If you're doing that though, maybe give me a heads up, okay? Those random phone calls are not as fun, I guess, for me. So, yeah, give me a heads up. Will it completely help you out? No, I hope it helps some. I don't know that it's gonna do everything that you and I would both want it to do there for you, but it's something, it's what I can offer. But don't ever be afraid. I mean, don't make rules up and then say Aaron will back you. But if it's a real rule, certainly send it my way and then give me a call ahead of time and that way I'm on board with you, what happens or whatever it is. All right, this section, I think we're gonna just kind of skim through this. But the only thing I will say about this section is that it's not a place for double dipping. And what do I mean by that? Like if you say that the system doesn't have vertical separation. So that's actually on the next slide. So you're going to write on section number 4 that doesn't have 36 inches or whatever. You don't also come to section 3 and say it doesn't have 36 inches. This is not to be a double dipping section to say the same thing you said on other parts of the inspection. This is for kind of catch-all weird things that would fit in here. And I will say it's not a very common section that you're going to be failing the system for. Next section is operating permits. I think we'll skip that because most of the time what you see is not applicable in the upper right-hand corner there, and you move on to the next section. If there is an operating permit, you're going to answer the questions and then recognize that if it's not compliant with the operating permit, that does mean that the system is not compliant. So for vertical separation, the soil page. First thing you see on there is the date of installation. Why are we going to talk about that, Aaron? That's just a really easy, we know the answer. Well, sometimes you don't know the date of the installation, which is fine. But if you are trying to say that I'm eligible for 2 feet of separation, that means that you knew it was installed prior to that 1996 date. Then just unknown for install date isn't enough because unknown could be yesterday. But Aaron, I know it was before 1996. Well, how do you know that? Well, the landowner has lived there since 1980, and he installed it himself in 1987. Great, put that in there. Maybe not that whole story in that little box up there, but down below somewhere, explain why you know that it was pre-1996, April 1st. Maybe the permit record just says August 1987. Great, put that in there. Because really at this point, all we're trying to do is figure out, is it eligible for 2 feet or not? So don't just put unknown unless you actually just have no idea. And then if that is the truth, then you're looking at 3 feet as your requirement. Okay? So the next piece here, we'll skip this because I think you all understand this side. We're moving over to this side here now. First thing is, what are we attaching? Well, I'm going to attach my soil boring logs. Okay, great. The next piece is, no, somebody else looked at the soil. I'm going to use 2 priors. I'm going to attach those. I just want to pause on that for a second. That's required. So just saying on file at the county is not the option. Whether that's happy thoughts for you right now or not, I don't know, and that's, I'm sorry if it isn't. But attaching them is a requirement. So, maybe a question of why, or what's a good reason to attach them. Think about, no rules for a second here. Think about in the time that you've all been working in planning and zoning, have you ever come across a time or heard of a time when you called into the county or looked online and said, hey, could I have a copy of this? And they look it up, or you look it up yourself, and you can't find it. It happens, right? So just saying on file at county, rules aside, is kind of a gamble. Whereas if you actually attach it to your inspection, now there's no more gamble because it's part of your inspection. All that aside, it is required, you do have to attach your priors to your inspection. Then there's that third option, not applicable because it's a holding tank, right? So you don't have soil borings to attach. The piece right below that is required as well. You're going to fill in those depths, and so that you can show your math, basically show your work on how you determine that there's X amount of inches of separation. So we get asked sometimes, what do I have to have in a compliance inspection boring log? That's what you have to have in a existing system inspection boring log. Not talking about designs right now. The design log is deeper, no pun intended. So if you're doing a compliance inspection on an existing system, that's what the minimum is for the information. That's for you doing your own log. That's for prior soil observations as well. So if you say, I'm going to use some prior work, and you look at it, and all it says is sand and a depth, and there's no color, for example, then that's not something you're able to use. Okay? So what does 2 prior verifications mean? Well, in rule, let's talk about that. What does it say in rule? Compliance must be determined by either conducting new soil borings, or by prior soil separation documentation by 2 independent parties. So it can't be the same person twice that you're using. I think we're all good with that. Here's the part I just want to clarify. The soil borings used for design or previous inspections are allowed to be used. Right there, it's laying out for you what can you use. You can use the soil borings from the design or soil borings from previous inspections. What if I want to use the county's inspection? I don't care what inspection you're using, as long as it has soil borings, right? So that's where when we talk about county's work, am I going to use that? How you're able to use that is if it's a previous inspection and it has the soil borings. In case you're wondering, have some inside info. Crow Wing County doesn't. Okay? So priors using the LGU's work, the counties, is not an option if it doesn't have that. So what is the LGU's minimum? The county's minimum says in rule, an infield verification of periodically saturated soil or bedrock at the proposed treatment. Okay. So they are doing an infield verification of the saturated soil, redox, whatever. They're not necessarily doing a boring. Some counties do, some do not. This one does not. So you're not able to use that if the county's just doing the bare minimum, you're not able to use that as a prior for one of your two priors.
So on your inspections for new system, where you guys put
36 inches.
36 inches
Yep.
and sign that we can't use them.
Correct. There's a nuance that we'll be able to use some of them. We'll get to that here in just a second.
Okay.
But yes, it is disappointing. I
Shame on you.
feel you on that one. Shame on me. I think my mentor told me to do it that way. I don't know what his name was, Tom.
Probably.
No, it wasn't Tom. That was the choice. Why? Because that was the minimum, and that's all the county was required to do.
Okay, it was okay at the time.
It's
Cutting edge at the time.
It's still okay. But it's not enough to count. Why is it not enough to count? Because of the previous rule citation that we just looked at where it says, well, here's what you can use. The soil borings from previous inspections. And that's exciting. So if the county's doing the bare minimum, once again, they're not a resource that you could use. If they're going above and beyond because they want to be able to be a package that you can use as one of your priors, you're going to have a soil observation log. That's going to be a dead giveaway. You're also going to have documentation of that. We were out there and we verified that there's that periodically saturated soil. And you notice that rule says at proposed. So that's not even talking when the system's in the ground. That's just saying at proposed site. So if you want the county's work to count, they also have to be documenting, like we were doing, was, okay, now the rock's in the ground, is there 3 feet? It's one thing to propose it, that's a whole other thing to make sure it actually exists once it's in the ground, right? So to package all that stuff up together, then the county stuff could be one boring log. Now, not probably well understood. You have in your packets, there's a stapled thing of a soil guidance document that was issued by the MPCA in 2019 that goes through what soil verification is all about and what's required and all that stuff. Why did that guidance document happen? Because people weren't really understanding it as well as they should have. And I'll be honest, I didn't fully understand it. So this document exists because a lot of people didn't fully understand it, would be my educated guess on this. It was well underway by the time I came over to the state, but so this document exists and explains, okay, here's what my options are. And there's a little table on one of the pages. And I like to go backwards. So option number 3 is easier to explain, I think. Well, I got 2 compliance inspections. And it's 2 different people, right? So I can use that. Yep, I can use that. But remember, that's if it has those pieces of information that were on, whoops, that went too far. That were on that slide. So I can use 2 compliance inspections that have that information on them. The middle one is the designer's information and the compliance inspection. Once again, as long as it has that information in it. And then the final option, which is the first one on the page here, is I'm going to use the designer's information and I'm going to use the county's information. And I would say, well, the county's information, maybe. It depends on if they have all that information in there or not. That soil boring log is the dead giveaway. If they don't have one, you're not able to use that. Now, This document was created in August of 2019. It was sent out in a bulletin article. It was sent out in an email to every designer, inspector, and LGU that we had emails for, saying, hey, let's talk about soil. So we gave you all this, the MPCA did, I should say, and it explained all this stuff. But the reason why it existed is because people didn't maybe fully understand it before that. And so there's this little bit of a nuance in there that gives you a little bit of a discretional option with the county. So on page 1, at the bottom, where it says, first if I can get on page 1. On page 1 at the bottom, it says soil separation verification, actually halfway down, soil separation verification when inspecting existing systems. Here's the process and documentation requirements related to soil verification for systems installed prior to this guidance. So there is a little bit of a nuance here. This is August of 2019. And you'll see the second bullet point, I believe it is. LGU will determine whether the available records are acceptable to be used. So that's kind of one of those points where you can say, well, okay, we didn't understand it maybe as well as we should have, so we weren't documenting exactly what we should have been documenting, but we know we were doing work. So if you work with the LGU and they say, yep, before that guidance document, we just weren't doing a great job with the documentation piece, we'll allow you to use that. They have that discretion in that document to do that. After the document, August 2019 and after, if it was installed, they don't have the discretion. Why? Because they were told. They were clarified. Time out. You got to start putting borings together. And so if they chose not to, at that point, that was a choice. And it was a legal choice because, again, the minimum requirement doesn't say they have to. But you do have that nuance there. And if that's really stressful, how I just kind of walk through that nuance, one of two things. Certainly give me a call. I'll talk to you about it in depth more and more. I'll explain it all 3 times if that's what it takes. Or if you want to, you can just say, I'm not going to worry about that. I know what the minimum is and rule for all systems, not just after 2019.
How many of you as designers have been putting rock fragmentation on your soil borings?
We always do. That's another discrepancy of the crowing county.
It's a discrepancy in the whole SSTS world that happens sometimes.
Well, I've got an issue with, okay, the counties, and I think all counties are basically that way. Any new installation, the county has to inspect. Well, now why, when that system is new, you've got the backflow out there, everything's opened up, why doesn't the county verify 3 feet of separation and all this boring and junk goes away? I mean, it's a done deal. Why aren't we allowed to get a private inspector to come out there and inspect that system and he'll document that there's 3 feet of separation? Now you got 2 guys that do it and it's over with.
So you can
The county chose to have that rule. Why aren't they doing it?
You can get to a point where you have 2, right? So if you have another inspector come out there and they
But that can be done right there when everything's open. You don't have to be boring in the ground. I mean, it's senseless.
But to answer your question, you could have somebody else do an inspection, even if the system's 1 day old, and document the soil.
But then you shouldn't have to have the county come out there
I'm
and
not
inspect.
saying.
See, they chose to have that power, then they should have to do that work.
So they're not choosing to have the power,
Well,
the state is telling them they
to
have
inspect
to.
every new system.
The state rule dictates that all counties have to have an SSTS ordinance, and they have to do all these minimum things, and that's one of the minimum things they have to do.
Well, I think that should be, because after 30 years of doing this, it should be so simple. I mean, running around boring all these holes steady is just absolutely senseless.
Nice, yeah, I get you. But again, on staff levels, I can't force that on to, there are some counties that would say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, I ain't never gonna do that. And we can't tell them, you should do that. Well, we can tell them that, but they don't have to, right? And there are some counties that actually do that. They have a whole bunch of documentation and soil boring logs and all that stuff. It's left up to the local government if they want to go that far.
On those inspection forms too, you should go back a few pages where they asked about the manholes being cracked.
Structurally unsound, maintenance will cover, 3A at the top.
3B.
3B.
Electrical hazard.
Yeah.
Is there any qualified electricians in here? We're not qualified to make that decision if it's safe or not. So why is it even on there? Makes no sense.
They felt like it was this. So you see, these are all, these up above is an imminent threat to public health. So if you had bare wires that were arcing or whatever, that's considered to be an imminent threat to health. So for us to allow you to say,
Qualified to make that decision.
hang on, but so for the state to say, go ahead and call that system compliant, even though there's this horrible, like, arcing electric disaster waiting to happen, I think that, I'm guessing, they probably felt that was not a place they wanted to leave it. I don't know that. That rule was made way before I started at the state.
That's kind of for something obvious, you mark it down.
Yeah, it's usually obvious. It's not gonna be where you're looking really fine tooth comb about electrical code or something like that. If you're not an electrician, I'm guessing nobody is here. I'm not.
Because he's talked to the state electrician, he'll tell you that you're not qualified to make that decision.
No? Have you ever thought about becoming an electrician?
Flare up control panel. I always just check on notices.
All right, let me ask you this question then. Let me ask you a question. Right now, you pay $250 for a permit. When I send Greg out to do the inspection, I pay him $175 to do that inspection. Okay? And then we have the rest orders to cover, you know, some of our staff time and all that stuff inside the house. Would you be, if I asked Greg to do a soil boring and do a boring for every time, would you be okay if I raised the fee for a septic permit by $100? And pay $350 to cover that cost?
Technically, so Chris, he's supposed to be verifying soil.
He's verifying soils, but he's not doing a soil loss.
He's looking at the side of the pit.
I get it, I know, but I've got a contract, okay? And so we all know how contracts work. I've got a contract with this, if I need more stuff done, it isn't gonna be free. And so are we willing to pay a little bit more for a permit so I can increase that, so I can get that done, or are we happy with what we have?
What does the contract say right now as far as him verifying soils? What does it, just verifying soils? So what's that definition?
The basically, the 3 feet of separation does not require a soil boring log.
So
I'm
we
just
have to
wondering.
take three pits of tobacco then?
No, this is that time of installation.
Right, this is time of
So that's just one boring though. So it'd be just one boring is all we.
So it's gonna be, from what he's doing now, it's gonna be, it'd be that additional piece. And so, you know, if I'm just, that's the question I'm asking, is that worth it? You know, I don't know how much it would be.
If there's already a pit there and he's standing there and all he has to do is.
I understand that,
soil boring.
but just understand, I've got a contract with Greg to do certain duties. If I wanted to do more, it's gonna cost more.
And
I'm not being argumentative, I just wanna know, what do we want, how, do you
All
want,
I'm
I
saying
mean,
is
okay.
if he's standing there verifying the 3 foot separation, he has a piece of paper and he writes down stand here and he's looking at a pit, why would that be any extra? I mean, it's.
So he had, so let me ask you this question then. So when we're out doing this. But when we're out, when you're out doing your soil boring logs and you got your months help booked up, your coloring and you do all that stuff, right? That take a little bit of time compared if all you had to do was go out and verify 3 feet separate. There is more work in addition to doing that. So there's just more documentation writing that down. And you have to also think about from the standpoint, it puts the county on a little more risk and liability because now. And I'm not opposed to that, but I'm not gonna have a guy go out there and racing around trying to get this done really quick. If we're gonna do it, there's gonna be a little extra time to do that, and it's not gonna be free.
But where do you
That's all
say
I'm
it's gonna take a lot of extra time? If they're verifying the soils, they should know the texture, they should know the redox, they should know, that's all it is then, and.
Right, I know that.
I just got a laser out there.
It's taking time, right? It just takes a little extra time.
It's 5 minutes, to write it down, you know.
It takes more.
That's
It's
not
gonna
how-
take longer. I will tell you, I would expect it would take longer than that, because I wanted that. I know that. Right, I think that's a good point you're bringing up. So obviously you want the county's work to count towards these future borings, correct? I mean, you want that to count going forward, so you can count it as a for inspection, right? Yeah, okay. So
Any
right,
system that's put in should be just verified right there at the day it's all the way open and everybody can look at it and it's done.
and I'm perfectly, I don't have a problem doing that. But right now, the way that it's set up, I've got a contract in place that doesn't do that. And if we want to adjust that contract, you know, I would be willing to bet money when somebody asks you to do stuff based on what you've agreed to, and say, well, I probably need a little more money to do that work. That's what the situation's gonna be. I'm just asking, is it okay? Would you want to see the fees raised a little bit to cover the cost of that or inspector do this?
Well, I'm just wondering why it isn't.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
I'm just wondering why it isn't a rule at the state level.
That part you can beat Eric about that. So that's, I'm not opposed to this at all, but just know that things just, you know, we all know that there's gonna be additional costs. I'm kind of hearing a little bit of a no, I'm hearing a yes. You know, I think we'll keep it going right now unless you guys give an email survey out to everybody to ask them what you think. If you guys want to, feel free to reach out to me or, you know, talk to ESS and get some feedback. It's just when we're dealing with the contract inspector and those such things, we're tied into.
So I guess has it changed? Because in 2007, like Tom's just saying, I mean, that verifying soils, so if Greg doesn't even have to verify soils, then if he doesn't have to verify 3 feet of separation, if they can't be used.
You know, the thing with the soil is the whole thing has changed. We started doing this in 2007. We were one of the few that started it, that was doing it. The whole thing with the MPCA and the university and the soils, it has taken, there's been many changes made over the years. We never really paid that much attention to rock fragments.
There weren't rule changes though. There are interpretations and practice, but the reality is the rule never said that the county had to do that.
So we have to verify. That's what we have to.
My point being just the soil fit, if you look at it, we're agreeing with the soil boring. That was okay.
We just didn't document that into a piece of paper.
If it's designed to say it, it's on the plan, you're gonna see a little different.
But I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree one bit.
But you just made a comment, you verified 3 feet of separation. I want to know, how do you do that without taking a laser, putting it on where the redox is, and putting it at the bottom of the rock?
Right, but
Without using a laser, how do you do that?
But what we're not doing is getting our month cell book out and coloring it and texturing it and putting it into a form and filling it out. That's what we're not doing. We're looking at the bottom of the media to the redox layer, verifying 3 feet.
How do you verify the 3 feet without a laser, without actually doing the elevation? How can you just look at it and say, yeah, it's 3 feet?
Documenting.
Right. When we're out, when Greg's out doing the inspection.
You gotta have 3 feet if you verify separation. So how do you do that without a laser?
Let's dig a hole next to the trench, use a tape measure.
Yeah.
Well, it's a mountain standing 40 feet away.
And where the rock bed is, you take it all out.
Yeah, where the rock bed is. Yeah. Tape measure.
If you, what was your name, sir? If you want to do follow-up with one of us after, we're able to talk you through some more questions too, if you want. Just so we can have the rest move on. Is that okay? Okay, perfect. Come find one of us. All right. If you think that was fun, Steve, let's get excited for this topic. How many soil observations are needed? We're talking about compliance inspections, not designs. Designs, you have the rule that says 3, the state rule says 3, but in ALS or alternative local standards or the old book or the yellow book or whatever you want to call it, that still says 1. I'm not talking about any of that. We're talking about compliance inspections. How many observations are required for a compliance inspection? Sometimes I've heard people say 1, I've heard people say 2, I've heard people say condescendingly, 5 or whatever, millions, but
As many as it takes. As many as it takes, that's the answer. So, rule doesn't say 1, it doesn't say 3, it doesn't say 7, it doesn't say anything like that. What it does say is that the inspector has to determine, do we have the minimum required vertical separation? And it also says that you're responsible for conducting the necessary procedures to make that determination. So if you feel that 3 borings was what you needed to do, by all means do 3. If you feel 5 was what you needed, then do 5. Keeping in mind, the soil observation must show that the whole drain field is compliant. How do I know the whole drain field is compliant? Probably by doing more than 1 soil observation. And remember, just remember, I said this a few times. I said I don't enjoy enforcement. I don't, or I want to help you. So that's what I'm trying to do here right now. I want to put you in a position to not get into a bind, because I've seen people getting into binds over this. That's why I put this into this, Todd. Dylan didn't even ask for this. You're getting bonus. I'm putting this in here because I want to help you. So the rule doesn't say 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever. It says you have to determine compliance. And so a lot of times what we've heard over the years is, and I just say that generically, when I was at the county, when I was at the state, here a lot of times you hear 1, that's all I need. Well, the rule says you have to observe the soil by default because you have to be able to determine separation. So yeah, you had to look at least once, assuming you weren't using prior verification. So you had to look at least once, that's true, but is that enough? Is that enough for you to feel good 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, when somebody else takes a look at it, and they do 4 observations, and I don't know what you were looking at 3 years ago, but I can't find it. Every observation I've done isn't good. And then the landowner gets excited and hires a second opinion because they think that you must have been right because they want your answer from 3 years ago. And then the second opinion does their own 3 borings, 4 borings, whatever, and say, yeah, I can't find it either, man. So now you have somebody in present day doing numerous borings between the 2 of them, all saying no good. And then your 1 boring from 3, 4 years ago that says good. And if you're wondering, that puts you in a bad place. Remember, I just said over there, I'm trying to help you and put you in a position to protect yourselves. I know some of you do this anyway, but you don't necessarily write it down. Or you'll do 3 borings, but I only need to write down 1 and you'll just turn that one in. I would highly recommend you take credit for the work that you're doing and write that down, put it into your compliance inspection that shows, hey, I did a boring on 3 sides of this pressure bed, not just 1. So when somebody's trying to question you, such as a surety company trying to go after your bond, just so we're clear, I have no role in bond claims. Again, I'm trying to help you protect yourselves here. So when they're coming after you, you can try to defend yourself a little bit more. Instead of saying, yeah, I did 1, well, they did 8 between the 2 of them, so why'd you get 1? Why'd you get your answer, right? That's not a comfortable position for you to be in, I'm pretty sure at that point. So please, please help yourself, protect yourselves, document more than 1. Rule, I can't say you have to do more than 1, but I am begging you, please do more than 1. Well, then I'll just, because, we get the thought of I'll do a boring down at the bottom trench. Let's say there's 5 trenches. I'll do a boring down at the bottom trench, because that'll be the worst. Maybe. Well, then I'll do it at the top, because that'll be the worst. Maybe. I don't know where the worst is going to be. I mean, you've all been there, probably more times than I have, where things change quickly. So set yourself up to be able to defend yourself for when that bond claim comes. Or sometimes it can lead to MPCA enforcement as well, where we have 2 compliance inspections in modern times, that have numerous borings. The county went out, looked at it with them too, and like, yep, there's no way this passes. And then you've got the Lone Ranger with one boring 7 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever, that says, this looks good. You're just in a really uncomfortable position at that point, and it's hard for you to defend yourself. So again, I beg you, please defend yourselves, help yourselves out, do more than one boring and document it. Please, please, please do that. All right. So compliance inspections, what are you trying to figure out? You're trying to figure out, is it pass or fail? I mean, it's really simple, right? Yes or no, is it good or bad? And so we have these categories that are in rule: imminent threat, failure to protect, and then there's this third one that doesn't get talked about a lot, but that's when you're not in line with your operating permit, right? Those are your three options for failure. And so I think we all understand what those are. Like failure to protect, I don't have separation, I have a cesspool, tank's cracked, you know, those things. Imminent threat, it's puking out on the ground, whatever those things are, we know what those are. But what about other things? What about other things that I might run into doing an inspection? They're concerning. Shouldn't I fail the system? The outlet baffle fell off. Shouldn't I fail the system? You can't. Why? Because state rule says, here's what fail means. If you don't have these things, any of them, your system passes by definition and rule. That doesn't mean these things that are concerning that you find should be ignored. Quite the opposite. We would want you to document them thoroughly. You might even want to look deeper into those specific issues. A good example I like to use is if there's a structure on top of a tank. That shed being on top of the tank doesn't mean that the tank is failing. But you might want to look a little closer, not that you're not already doing this, but you might want to take a little bit closer look. Because what if when they were building that shed or they were hauling it in there, they broke the tank? So now there's a crack in the wall below operating depth or whatever, right? So that would be a reason for non-compliance, not the shed sitting on top of the tank, but the crack that was caused when they were putting the shed there would be a reason for non-compliance. So you see that nuance there? It's not the shed. Not that the shed isn't important, but it's kind of a little bit of a red flag that you might want to take a closer look. Or if the outlet valve was missing, you might want to take a closer look at the drain field to see if it's shot, now that it's full of junk, right? And so some of you may have noticed there is a handout there, a printout that explains this very subject about what's compliant, what's not compliant, and then what are concerning things. And if you have these concerning things, write them in your inspection report. I would also tell you, please, talk to your homeowner, your customer, whatever. I'm sure you're already doing that. But again, protecting yourself from them saying something to you in the future about, why didn't you tell me that my baffle was missing? Well, if you write it in your inspection report, at least you can point to that and say, well, I did. And they can't be as mad at you at that point, right? But again, document all those things, but those things on their own are not reasons for non-compliance. They can lead to non-compliance, but they are not non-compliance on their own. And then the final thing that we'll chat about here is other work. So in 7083, there's a part for designers, there's a part for installers, inspectors, so on and so forth. And they all describe what each one of you can do for whatever specialty that you have obtained. But it doesn't catch everything. No surprise there. So if you find yourself in a place where you're not really sure who's allowed to do it, there is a rule right after all those, 7083-0790. That is for other work. And that's exactly what it does. Is it basically tells you all these other things that you're not sure who can do them, call the MPCA and they will tell you who can do them and if you need a license and who can do it. And one example of that is tank repair. Was asked to talk about this a little bit. So tank repair, who can do it? Maintainers, installers, and service providers. Why? Because if you look at each one of their rules, it talks about they're authorized to do repair work. So that's who can do it. Now, what do you actually have to do if you want to repair a tank? So if you're kind of at a fork in the road here, if it's a registered tank, obviously you're going to make sure there's no other damage, but you're going to do a water tightness test, and you have to have a certified licensed professional engineer help you out. They have to sign off that that tank is good, what was done to it fixed the problem, and that they are solid with it. I should point out, by the way, registered tanks, that became a thing for those of you who don't remember. That was around 2012. So if it's since then, it's probably on the registered list. So you'd have to have an engineer sign off on it and say that it's good. And you'd have to be a maintainer, installer, or service provider. And that could be two separate people. Now, the next piece is, well, what if it's not on the registered list? Well, that first point there says, verify all requirements of 1900 to 2030 are met. That's kind of saying, could it be registered if you had to? Is it following the requirements of a modern tank? The next piece is the water tightness test, and then finally the engineer again. And you might be thinking, why wouldn't I just install a new tank? And I would probably agree with you. But the point of this slide is to just give you the information to understand that if you wanted to fix a tank, here's what you would be told the answer is.
Did you have a definition of what repair was on a different slide I missed, or what do you define?
I guess it would depend on the situation. You know, what specifically are you dealing with? I mean, the manhole cover is not a tank repair. If there's a crack in one of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 walls on the tank, that would be a repair. Baffle, you can put a new baffle on, right? So I mean, it would depend on what specific example you're talking about, but mostly if it's the tank itself that has something wrong that you are fixing, like the walls cracked,
Sure.
that's a repair to the tank.
That's a professional licensed engineer.
Is that a fun answer? No.
And on the
I'm aware of
tanks
that.
that have a seal in the middle, you're replacing that seal part. That's still tank repair, correct?
Yeah, if there's a leak of any, whatever the leak is, if you have a leak and you're fixing that leak of that tank, you are fixing the tank and you need to follow that. Again, is that a great answer, a fun answer? No, but I'm providing information for you so you can make great, educated, informed decisions and have a happy day. when
That's
you're
all in
repairing.
7080 though anyway, right? It's nothing new, is it?
It's in there, but unfortunately, it's not explained really easily like that.
Legalese.
Oh yeah, it's exciting. I had to really dive into it with Cody and Brandon one day, so I was really rock solid on it before I went out on the road.
So if there's a crack in the bottom of a tank, let's just say one of our local tank manufacturers was out and put some super duper hydraulic sealant in there. That has to be, technically, what you're saying is that has to be reviewed by an engineer.
Just to clarify, are you saying there's a leak all the way through?
Well, there's a crack in the bottom of a tank.
Right, but if it's not all the way through, then it's not a leak and it's technically compliant, right?
What if it is?
But if you're trying to say, I gotta fix this crack, it's a leak in the tank, whatever.
We've all found them. We've all found them. And whether there's a leak or not, I'd say probably not, because there's no water gushing in the bottom. Okay? Manufacturer comes out and they repair it. Now, are they covered by their tank registration under this professional engineer? Or is this something separate that we have to go and do?
So I think there's a distinction there. If it's a crack to the point where you have all the way through the ability for water to go back and forth, That's now non-compliant because it's a leak below operating depth. That's, now I'm fixing a broken tank. If you just look at a tank and there's this little wall that isn't great looking to you, and you just think that adding some of whatever you called it, magic glue or whatever.
Super hydraulic cement.
Super hydraulic cement. If you think that's a good idea and you want to do that, and it's already a compliant tank, I think you're still okay at that
I
point.
think we've all seen it. I think everybody in here has seen it.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, let's be real. And you come out and they put some of this stuff in there. These modern hydraulic cements are super. They do wonderful things. And if they're covered, I would dare say that they could probably be covered underneath their warranty in a tank, which has been signed off by a professional engineer. That repair should be covered by that engine. That whole process should be covered by the tank manufacturer.
And that's gonna depend, if you're dealing with a tank that you just installed 3 months ago and there's something wrong with it, that's one thing the tank manufacturer is probably gonna make that right for you, and all of that ends happily ever after at that point. But if you are looking at a 10-year-old tank and you're wanting to fix it, whether it was on the registered list or not, there has to be a certified professional engineer involved with that process.
With that repair, with that specific repair.
And I would think that most of them either have their own engineer or they've got one that they use anyways. So you can at least have access to an engineer to be involved, but they do have to be involved.
These hydraulics, they're all engineered for this kind of stuff.
Technically though, Tom, they aren't even supposed to be in that tank, according to the first bullet point.
If you repair a tank, you have to have the engineer involved. Again, if it's a short, define short, if it's a short period of time after the installation and you're working with the manufacturer to just make things right, because you feel like they gave you a bad tank or whatever, that will just, yep, I get you on that one. But if we're legitimately looking down the road and you have to fix a 10-year-old, 5-year-old, whatever tank, you're at a point where you're now in the repair world, that has to be done. And the other thing I would say about that before we leave that topic is that whatever you do to repair that tank, you're gonna document it. You're gonna get the engineer to sign off that they were there and involved in some capacity. And then you're gonna have that into the permit file at the county so that it's clear what happened to that tank in 2020 or whenever you did that repair. So nobody's wondering, why do I have a notice of non-compliance and now I have a compliance? Well, how did the tank all of a sudden become compliant? Well, here's how. We have the documentation of that. Those types of repairs, some jurisdictions would require a permit for that. Crow Wing still would not, right? That hasn't changed since I left. Awesome, okay. So there's no permit required in Crow Wing County for that type of an activity. But that's just in Crow Wing we're talking about. You go to other jurisdictions, some might require that. So it'd be communicating with that county or city or township on what their specific answer is for that. No matter what you do, whether a permit's required or not, for the love of God, document it and put it in your permit file. Okay? And as promised, that was my last thing. So, if you have any questions for me, feel free to get a hold of me now, next week, whatever. I don't care if I already explained it in class and you don't want to ask me because he already explained this, he's going to think I'm dumb. No, I'd rather explain it to you 3 times if that's what it takes. So please give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever you got to do. I'll be happy to go over things with you, even if they weren't covered today. So, okay? All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so we're gonna push just 5 minutes so we don't have to do a break. We'll have your certificates in the back. Really quick, I'll just introduce for Dylan, going over new grant information for these failing compliance. So great information coming about that. While I have you for 3 minutes, does anyone have questions, concerns about short-term rentals and compliance inspections? Do we need to have any questions answered about that? Or are we really good?
The only question that I've gotten is, if the system isn't big enough for the number of bedrooms that we're trying to rent it for.
Yep.
And
So the context that folks are gonna see is their big struggle in understanding that the septic system that was installed on the property that they just bought last year had a certain capacity regardless of the construction elements that took place. What we have available to us that kind of be after the design, right? It would just be nice if you could design it based on what was actually built. They admit their bedroom capacity, right? So they're saying, I want to rent, and even if it was a 3-bedroom house, they want to do 5 in there, however they want to do it. We're going to take that sizing and say, well, if that's what you're renting, we're looking at some treatment area.
Yeah, and Nicolette was saying you do the best guess.
And so,
Lots of information that
this
we
will get
have.
back
yeah.
to site plans and the reason why we're getting pretty, we've noticed that in dealing with, as I'm sure you guys have looking for soil borings, in some of the past documentation, the lack of information has now led into some compliance of existing systems that trenches just keep shrinking, and now we got somebody that's trying to do a 4-bedroom rental and they're saying they have 15-foot trenches. What do we do in that situation? I'll probably go out and try to probe their trenches and figure it out as part of the septic analysis. So I just wanted to make sure there was concern on our end that, these landowners may be reaching out to you with some very bizarre questions. They just don't understand. Broken down, we do the reverse math. If we know the size of the drain field, we'll reverse it back to try to get an understanding as to what happened with that system. So short-term rental questions for that. And again, don't fail a system. I know it's not probably going to happen, but do not apply our sizing standards or anything out of the short-term rental ordinance into any part of your work when it pertains to design or information we're looking for. Take understanding of septic drain field if you have that, because we're going to take a calculation and that's what we're going on without digging up a drain. So, all right, thanks.
Wait, can I just say one
Yeah,
more thing?
yes.
So just as far as who, basically the cities, if somebody is calling for an inspection and it's in the city of Emily, and
Yep.
Emily has not verified whether or not they're going to do it.
Yep.
They should contact city of Emily to verify if they're doing anything, and we don't do anything until they need it.
If you feel comfortable saying to that client that you would, decline a compliance because they're looking specifically for a short-term rental compliance.
Right, yeah.
If you can spin it that you gain compliance out of it regardless of what Emily's gonna do, and they need a compliance inspection, have at it.
Yeah.
I foresee that they would have a similar septic alignment to what we have.
Possible, yep.
Minnesota Department of Health kind of does it a little bit, so the previous stuff was going on. So that would be my advice to them is if the city's not going to implement some sort of compliance, which most of them have a structure like that, I would just encourage them to, there's no downside in getting a compliance inspection for future use, so.
Thank you.
Good question, thank you. Good? Luann, you're good? Yeah, okay.
Of course.
Always.
Okay, real quick, we'll go over septic grants. Crow Wing County gets state funds to replace failing low-income household septic systems. We'll pay for 100% of the system. So just asking basically for you guys to carry this information on to your clients. If you notice someone's got a failing system, you think they may qualify for low-income standards, please push this on them. I'm trying to get rid of this money. I don't want it. And we are applying for another grant that's a one-off from the state. That one could potentially be $100,000. So we're basically just trying to get the word out, get these spread out and distribute those funds. I mean, it's basically free money for you guys, so.
The 2 grants piggyback off each other or have the ability to?
They could, you probably don't need to because this could cover 100% of your cost, so pay for everything. The only thing you have to pay for is the initial inspection, and then the design, and then the permits themselves, so fairly low cost overall, otherwise we'll pay for whatever the system, they just need 2 bids. Here's the application quick. General applicant information, property information, super simple. Required documents, I just need a failing compliance inspection, whether it's on file or you do it for them. I need 2 itemized bids from licensed contractors. We will cover the lowest bid. I need tax documents 2021 and 2022 just to verify their income, and then a photo ID of the person, the applicant. Other than that, pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy there.
So in the past, this program was run through the Region 5 Development Commission over in Staples. And so we've taken that and brought it back in-house. I think you're going to see a simplified process, and when you work done, you should be able to, the plan will be to be able to cut you guys a check a little bit quicker than I think for those who tried this in the past with Region 5. So And so what we want to find out is there a need for this? And we'll continue to pursue other grants. But this is, I think, you'll find it to be a pretty streamlined process compared to what we have in the past.
You got 40,000 total right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
We just applied for $100,000.
And then these are usually reoccurring every year so far.
Yep,
So
yeah.
we should probably be getting.
But what the state looks at though, is that are we spending our money? Because if we're not getting that money spent, we don't get as much in that. So we want to make sure that that money gets spent down. So that's why we want to get this out there for folks who need to upgrade, who don't have the funds to really afford it on their own. So.
In the state, who decides the criteria on the income? State?
Yeah.
You guys do.
We choose the low end, yeah, it's the low end, yeah, we choose the low income. And we just follow the USDA guidelines.
Okay.
We're not making stuff up on our own at all.
So what is that? Like what numbers, if I'm with somebody and what would be like a general?
Yeah, well, we're basing it off HUD 2022 guidelines. So for a single person, it'd be 44,000 low income. And then obviously it takes into consideration if there's 2 or 3 people who are earning income in the household, that'll add to it. And that could potentially bring it up to whatever, 70, 60, 80,000. I have to look at the numbers.
I mean, it's not.
It's nothing.
So, yeah, it will fit some folks, I think, that would fit into that pretty well. So if you find those folks, point them our way, we'll get this filled out, make sure they qualify, then they come back to you guys and get the design work on and all that stuff. So, but we want to make sure they qualify first.
Other than that,
Are there any questions? I just want to say thanks for coming out. It's been nice to see everybody show up. I appreciate the questions. Be ready, snow's coming. I think they said 5 to 9 between now and Sunday. Between Saturday and Sunday, like up to 5 to 9 inches. So I'm sure some of you guys run a plow once in a while out there. So it's the winter that won't die. So right. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thanks for showing up.